They had a little latch and a padlock. So the manager gave us a key and we went into the room. There was a bed in the room, and it had one sheet, a form-fitted sheet on the bed, no blankets, no pillows. There was one table and one chair. There was a shower, and the shower was in like a tiled bathroom, and it just had one knob to turn the shower on. And whatever the temperature of the water came out of the shower, that was the temperature of the water. And the sink didn't have any plumbing into it. If you washed your hands, the water went into a 5-gallon bucket that was underneath the sink. Fortunately, we had our backpacks with us, and we had some food in our backpacks, and we had some water. And we lay down on the bed, and we used our backpacks for a pillow, and we sort of slept. Not really, but kind of slept. Well, 3 o'clock in the morning, the manager came and knocked on the door to wake us up. We got up, we got dressed, we were pretty groggy, and we walked down to where the clinic is. And we got there by 4 o'clock. And outside of the clinic there was a porch. And around the sides of the porch there was wooden benches. There was already about 30 people there, and we found a seat on one of the benches, and we sat down. It was still a little bit of dark, and we got to conversing with one of the ladies that was waiting out here on the porch. And through our limited knowledge of Spanish and her broken English, we found out that we needed to have a chicken egg. She also told us that we needed to have bandages. So my wife and I were sitting there talking, where do we get bandages and an egg at, well, by now it was about 5 o'clock in the morning. Where do we buy these? Where do we make these purchases? And about that time, across the street, a man opened up a lemonade stand. He had this big door that he pushed up and he propped over it. And we walked over there, and what did he sell? He sold eggs and bandages. So we were able to buy our egg, and we bought a package of bandages. And fortunately he had some Nescafe, and we were very pleased to have this warm drink. So we sat there on this wooden bench, and we had our Nescafe, and about 5:30 the doctor came. And he drove up, and he parked his car on the side of the clinic. And he got out. And this man was huge. And he's like a god down there. Whenever people see him, they bow down to him and they say, Buenos dias. And he's very gruff. And he says, Buenos dias. And there was a little janitor there. The little janitor went over to the door on the clinic and he unlocked the padlock. This guy had gold bracelets hanging down around his neck. He had gold necklaces. And he also had people in the car with him that worked in his clinic. So he and his whole entourage walked into the clinic. And this man had huge fingers. He looked like a Mayan warrior. He didn't no more look like a psychic surgeon than anything. All of his entourage walked into the clinic, and then they closed the door. And everybody sat outside. And it was raining occasionally. Whenever it would rain, everybody would come in underneath the porch, and then when it stopped raining, then they would go back outside. Pretty soon the door opened, and this man that we had met the night before, his name was Hector, he walked outside and he read off the names of a list of people. It was about 8 or 10 people, and all of these people got up and they walked into the clinic and they closed the door. After about 15 or 20 minutes, the door opened up and these people started coming back out. Some of them had bandages on their head. Some of them were being carried out on a stretcher. Some of them had bandages around the waist. And me and my wife was looking at each other, and we were just wondering what was taking place. After all the people came out that had had the psychic surgery, they closed the door again. Then about 10 minutes later, they opened the door and they called off a list of about another 8 people. And the people whose name they called, they all went into the clinic and they went through the same procedure. After about 10 or 15 minutes, these people came out. Many of them had bandages on this. This process went on for about 2 or 3 hours because there was about 50 people out there waiting to be treated by the doctor. About 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, finally Hector came out and he called me and my wife and he said, the doctor wants to see you now. We walked into this little tiny clinic, and the doctor's office was a small table about 30 inches high and was probably about 4 feet wide, and the doctor sat on the table in a chair by the table. When it came to our turn, first of all, they asked us where we were from, and we told them that we were from Arizona. And he kind of grunted, huh? And he says, okay, we will see you now. So my wife told me, she said to me, you go first. So I went over there and stood in front of the doctor, and he wanted my egg. And all this time I'd been holding my egg in the left hand. I gave my egg to the doctor. He had a very tall glass of water, and he took the egg and he broke the egg into this glass of water. And then he used a magnifying glass and he looked at the eggs, and this is how he made his diagnosis. And behind the doctor there was a table, and there were several people sitting at the table, and one of the people at the table was his secretary. And the doctor started telling his secretary everything that was wrong with me, about 5 or 6 things that were wrong with me, and the secretary wrote down these things. And the amazing thing about it was everything that he said that was wrong with me, I had just been up to America and I'd paid the doctor in America about $2,000 to make this diagnosis, and here I was in Quintana Roo and this doctor was making the same diagnosis, and his clinic is free. After he diagnosed me and wrote all these things on the piece of paper, they gave me the piece of paper, and then it was my wife's turn. He diagnosed her. And because we were travelers and from Arizona, the doctor said that he would operate on us the next morning at 7 o'clock. They said that normally they don't do the operation that quick. They wait about 7 days. My wife and I went back up to the motel and stayed at the motel. We also walked around town and looked at some of the shops and so forth, and we stayed at the motel that night. The next morning we got up and we went down to the clinic at 7 o'clock, and there was a few people waiting for operations, and the doctor did some operations. People come from all over Central America and Mexico because this man, he has a great deal of fame. One of the men from Mexico City had open heart surgery just before us and walked out of the clinic and went home. It was our turn to do the psychic surgery, and they had private rooms inside of this clinic. The private rooms was a table, and then they had a piece of wire stretched from one wall to the other, and there was a shower curtain on it. I went into this private room and I laid down on the table. There was already a stretcher on the table, and I laid down on top of the stretcher, and my wife, it wasn't her turn yet. She was just waiting. It was my turn to have the psychic surgery first. So the nurse came in and she told me, I was laying on my tummy and I used my jacket for a pillow. She told me to undo my belt because they were going to operate on my kidneys. I had 3 cysts on my kidneys. And she swabbed my kidney area with some kind of liquid. I don't know what it was. It could have been alcohol because it felt cold to me. So after she cleaned up the area, and another thing, I had to take the bandages and I had to lay on the bandage. That's why we had to bring our own bandages. And I thought it was very funny going to the clinic and bringing